I think this episode is one that's been a long time coming for me because though I'm a West Texas kid for, the first 19 years of my life, like I'm equally as much, if not more, shaped by the 22 years I lived in Utah. And as I was coming into trail running 2012, 2013, of the two brands we're talking about today, Altra and Topo Athletic, Ultra was also sort of emerging around that time. And so, I've not known trail running without Ultra, making moves in the space. So if we start
Totally.
with Ultra, maybe just because of my Utah proclivities, what's the? I mean, we all know the zero drop, I think, but maybe let's just even start
Yeah.
there. Ultra comes on the scene as a zero drop shoe right after, which this is crazy to me where this is going. Right after the five finger, the Vibram, like the minimalist shoe thing was happening. I feel like Ultra started to come and respond to that and say, hey, there's good stuff happening there, but you need more than just nothing. You need a little bit of something, but that zero drop is important. Okay, I'm teed you up and you take it from there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of this will come out of like the born to run phase of life and trail running. And because a lot of what came out of that book, Born to Run, was this natural space of running where you want to be really connected with the ground.
Yeah.
With yourself, like natural movement. And rightfully so, like there are people around the world that have always moved that way. And of course, like, you want to utilize your body by how it's made to move, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where both Topo Athletic and Vibram Five Fingers will get there. And Ultra, like that's what they're playing on, that like the natural movement of the body, the natural propensity. And both companies are playing off of that in a big way. And
interesting.
Yeah. Do you?
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying, like, even what's crazy is that you're going to have to help me out with Topo Athletic. Were they running congruent? Was Topo happening at the same time?
Not exactly.
Okay.
So I need to remember the year that, maybe that's something we can look up. I don't remember the year that Topo Athletic
I mean,
started,
as I was looking it up, it was saying 2013. It was founded in 2013 by Tony Post, formally, which is plus or minus a few years on Ultra.
Yeah, exactly.
But I didn't hear about Topo. This maybe isn't saying a lot. I didn't hear about Topo until the last couple of years. 4 years.
No, really. I mean, the last like 5 or 6 years has been the big onset of Topo Athletic. But so they weren't necessarily running side by side for a while. So Tony Post, the founder of Topo Athletic, he was also the main man behind the Vibram Five Fingers, which is why we bring it up. And which is crazy. So he was working with Vibram, and that's a huge thing that's still around today. And either other companies are trying to mimic some of those things. And if you're not familiar with the Five Fingers, it's really like a glove for your foot with a little bit of Vibram outsole on it. You'll see it in the gym a lot. I remember when my mom got into trail running around like 2010, she had pairs of Ultra. So there is that interplay because it's all focusing on basically the same thing. Low drop.
Did you run in them?
I never did because I was like a high school, college track athlete. So I just, you had bikes and a pair of trainers.
Yes, I was a very non-serious runner. And I had actually gone with my wife to Beijing in 2009, 11, or 10, 11, something like that. And I got some like Chinese knockoffs of them and I played around in them for a little bit. I mean, they look silly, but man, and they hurt. So I don't know what the upside was, but they look silly and they hurt. But to your point, there was this push toward, let's say, the way that our foot had evolved and trying to embrace the way that our foot had evolved instead of taking all these years of our foot becoming what it is and then trying to push against that and put foam in different places and all that. And so they were saying, let's go back to how our foot was made.
Exactly. And then that would promote better movement overall. It would promote less injury rates. It promote a lot of things. But the problem was that, and still is, you can't just go from especially when Altra and Topo came on the scene, where most shoes were a 10 to 12 millimeter drop.
Oh
A
my
lot of
goodness.
shoes these days are 8 to 4, somewhere in there. But going from many shoes that were 10 to 12 millimeter drop to 0, that really throws your body for a loop, because you're all of a sudden your Achilles are being pulled on in different ways, your foot splaying in different ways, and all this, is good. There's a lot of pro athletes who, implement barefoot running to some extent, or do a little bit of running in a very low drop shoe, something like that, and so like it makes sense physiologically, but the application of it for everybody isn't always there, and that's where both of those companies will always have a hard time with. It's not for everybody. Even though you can put the poster out, it is for everybody, it's natural, it's not going to work for everybody. Like my wife, she's an Ultra convert. She got the Timp 2, which is like still like one of the best Ultra shoes that was ever made. And like it reset her posterior chain, her back was feeling better, her glutes were feeling better, and she was like a 5-time All-American. What? And so like all of a sudden, like switching to Ultra, she's feeling like much better as a runner. She doesn't wear shoe inserts anymore. And so it is for some people, but for me, like I could do it like 1 to 2 days a week without feeling like my calves are trashed or something like that.
Yeah. That's crazy. So you're saying that about your wife, and I think, oh, that's cool. She's a hobby runner, 5-time All-American who would also benefit from that change. I hear what you're saying. It's not for everybody, but it's also not just for the average hobby jogger. Like this was changing people's lives, and there's variables in place, but some people added tremendous value, and you really didn't know if the Vibram was going to work or Ultra Zero Drop was going to be for you unless you just bought them and went for it.
Yeah. And like, I know there's a lot of like your boy Scott Jurek memes that are really harping on Ultra, but I think it comes from that day and age of where it hit hugely. Ultra hit hugely. The natural running hit hugely. And then everybody dove into it and they stuck with it even when it wasn't for them. But now we're in a day and age where it's like there's variability to all that, right? We're an evolving industry. Even Ultra with their, which we'll talk about, they had a bigger ego for a long time, saying like, this is the way we want to do it. And I totally appreciate that. We want to be zero drop. We want to have foot shaped shoes, but for the consumers to be able to access that, they've only like in the last couple of years have introduced some shoes with a little bit of drop. Which is where Topo Athletic has always had that. And so,
I think on some levels, what's surprising about Ultra is that it got so much market share as a zero drop shoe. And I don't even know how to make sense of that. It wasn't necessarily, marketing, I'm sure was great, but maybe that was it. I mean, there was a while where every event in at least the Western United States was an Ultra event. Western States was an Ultra event.
Wasatch there still are a lot for sure. It's just kind of being overshadowed by the other big dog in the industry right now, which is Hoka. And so both of those companies, give credit where it's due, have invested so much in the trail industry and are great for their own reasons. But I think where Ultra took off and continued to take off is because of their principles of having the foot shaped more than the zero drop. I think the foot shape is what matters to most people than the zero drop itself. And so feel like we should take a step back in history now and let's talk about both brands and their onset and their where they're very valuable. And so like Ultra started because two guys, Golden Harper and Brian Beckstead, they were altering shoes at a running store. So they would take shoes that were on the wall and they would alter them for people who were having like back pain or different hip pain, those kind of things. And they were literally shaving off the heel to make the heel to toe drop less. And sometimes they would go all the way to 0. It wouldn't be all the time, but they were shaving it to be less. And they were seeing a bunch of success with that. And so then more and more people were coming to him and say, hey, I heard you had a shoe that did this, this, and this. And so that's when they started having this idea of like, oh, maybe we should be developing our own shoe with these principles. And so that's the basics of how Altra was born.
I'm fairly certain that is Golden
yeah.
Harper's dad's store, or like the family store there in Utah County, so like Provo, Orem. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Orem, I believe, is where it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's really like, I love hearing of stories like that, of like, they started with really deep purpose of like, they're solving a problem for people that really mattered. And so I love that about Altra. And even when Topo had risen and still continues to rise as their major competitor, of like, they were saying, no, we need to stay true to this. And I'll always appreciate that they're doing that. And I know they'll also get a lot of flack for adding some shoes with drop, or when they started having different lasts from a slim last. They have 3 different widths, basically, that you can purchase from nowadays. And so they get flack in their growth, but I think it's necessary growth for them to continue to be a relevant brand.
Yeah.
And so like, I really appreciate that story. And then on the other side with, unless we want to keep going with Altra for a little bit.
This is, so I know a lot about Altra. I just know so little about Topo. I'm excited.
Yeah. So then Topo Athletic, which was founded by Tony Post, which is where the name Topo came from. So he has a lot of industry experience, like, I don't know, 35, 40 years at this point of industry experience. And he started getting into shoes. He's a runner later in the game. So I don't think he was running in high school. He did a lot of team sport stuff. And then when he got into college is where he was a walk-on in Tulsa. Yeah. And so then that's where his running career started. And then after that, he wasn't done with running. So he's got into the running industry with Rockport. And so he started low in Rockport, which is at the time mostly just like business casual shoes, right?
Yeah. Like comfy loafers and stuff.
Exactly. And so Rockport was one of the companies that started to take technology from like athletics and importing it into their own business casual shoes.
I mean, that's great. That's a success to Rockport that they live in my brain. Like they have that position in my brain. Cause my dad wore them maybe in the early 90s. And because he managed a jewelry store, he was up on it, and he worked at a furniture store and he was on his feet all the time. And so he would always, he would talk about Rockports like as being the shoe that you could stand in all day and work, but still looks nice. That's crazy. Okay.
So then I don't believe they had any athletic line, but that's where Tony Post came in. So he started doing marathons in Rockports. And so like, and throwing out good times. And then I think that got the conversation rolling of eventually making athletic shoes. And one of their first athletic shoes was for the Leadville Trail 100.
No way.
And so when that crossover, because the Taramara, am I saying that right? Taramara.
I have a friend in Draper whose name is Frank LeBaron, and he'll say he's Tara Humaran, and when he says it, he says Tarumaran.
Okay. But I'd like to honor that. Yeah.
I tried really hard and he worked with me for a while on it, and he said I got close.
Way to go. Okay. So whenever it comes up, can you just say it? Because
it's like Tarumaran, even though it's
Tarumaran.
Gosh, forgive me, anybody out there who knows better than me, but this is an honest effort on my end.
Well, and I appreciate that because like we have a lot of students in our area that come direct from Mexico City area. And a lot of times in trend, when they move here, their names get changed. And I do not love that. So I want to honor them.
Put the effort into getting it right. It's their name, for goodness sake.
Exactly. That is their identity. So the Tarumaran?
Yes.
Exactly.
I think.
So some of their Rockport's first pairs developed with Tony Post were in Leadville. And so, which is a big part of like that Born to Run book.
Yeah.
And so they were the company that here's some shoes. Could you wear? Yeah.
Yeah. And oh my gosh. Crazy.
Isn't this crazy?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of intersections here.
Yeah.
And so they offered the shoes, they started with them and eventually ended up in their sandals. again.
That's right.
But
Wow.
so that's where the onset of really like Topo Athletic came from, even though it was Rockport shoes. So a lot of his learnings came from that era.
Got it.
And then he went to Vibram from there. And I think Vibram is the right way to say it. In America, we say Vibram, but Vibram.
Where's it located?
Vibram?
Yeah.
I think, are they Italy?
Are they? Yeah. Are they?
Maybe.
So is Vibram I mean, we obviously see them on licensed to all the shoe companies, a bunch of them use Vibram. Yeah. Is that what they do? And the Five Fingers was just like, hey, let's make something in-house, but they are a company that outsources essentially the grip on the bottom of shoes to license that to
basically.
Companies. Got it.
Yep. And so how it works is that they'll work with the designers of each shoe brand with the different, mid or outsoles that they have. They do have midsoles these days, which is in like Norda. Okay. The Norda shoes, 01, 02, and 03, they all have Norda mid or Vibram midsoles, but we mostly see the outsole, the yellow prints.
Yeah.
And so that's the Vibram yellow. It's very noticeable.
Yeah.
And so they'll work with companies to create different outsoles based on the rubbers they're using, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And so, so that's mostly where they're known from. But so those Rockport shoes already had Vibram on them. So that's a nice,
okay.
Another segue here.
Yeah.
And so then when Tony Post went to work with Vibram, that's where Five Fingers came out of that era. And then he went from there into his own venture with Topo Athletic. And so Topo Athletic is also known for having Vibram on the outside, the outsole of their shoes. And so, again, there's just a lot of interplay there. But where Tony Post wanted to set the precedence, again, like Altra, you want to utilize that big toe. Your big toe is one of the main components of your foot for the clawing and the power action of your foot. For toe off, we talk about it as toe off and running. Okay. But where most shoes have difficulty in utilizing that power is that there's no room for that toe to splay and then push down. Because when you're walking around naturally, your foot's going to spread out, and then that big foot or the big toe has more power to be able to push down into the ground, and that's where your toe off comes from. So Altra and Topo Athletic are cueing off of that movement.
Okay, when you say cueing, what do you mean? Like there's something in the like ergonomic design that's just allowing for that to happen better than my Pegasus were at that time or whatever?
Exactly. So the toe box of the shoe is what they would call foot shaped. And so it's going to mimic the shape of a natural foot. So if you put your foot down on a piece of paper, trace the outline of it, that's the shape they want of a shoe, rather than fitting it into something that's not exactly that shape.
Okay.
And so,
wow.
And so again, I think that's the piece of Altra that's been the most foundational for them, of like people are experiencing that, especially in long ultra distance races where you're out there for, anywhere from 12 to 48 hours in a pair of shoes. You want that natural splay. It's going to feel much better. You're going to have more room. And so,
that's incredible. Okay. So they're both thinking this way.
They're both thinking this way.
So crazy. It is crazy that they were, how parallel these brands are. Okay. So we have Tony doing his thing, comes out, he emerges. Do you know essentially anything about like release number 1 for Topo? Are you familiar with it to that degree?
I don't know. Yeah. I do know like they came out with the Ultra Venture, which is one of their shoes that had a 5 millimeter drop from the onset. Okay. They also came out with some 0 drop options. And so they play the space of either no drop to low drop. Their highest is a 5 millimeter drop.
Oh,
whereas Ultra for the longest time was just 0. We're only doing 0.
Yeah.
And so that's where I say that Ultra has had an ego, which is kind of funny that their midsole name is an called ego.
Yeah.
The ego midsole. They've had an ego that's kind of, again, I appreciate it a lot that they stuck to it, but that ego kind of hurt them when Topo was on the rise. Because if you couldn't handle the zero drop, there's really only one other viable option in the trail running or running space in general, and that was to go to Topo. So that's where Topo Athletic, I feel like, gained a ton of popularity. And then once you're in them, you can tell that they're super quality shoes, really thoughtful in design. You get the toe splay, but what was different at the time of, like you said, 5 to 6 years ago, is that Topo Athletic really had a secure midfoot and a secure heel. So he wanted the toes to be able to splay, to do their action, but where many ultras were kind of losing traction in a sense, whereas that it wasn't holding in the midfoot and heel as much. So when you get to more technical stuff, maybe in shoes like the Superior, but that had very little midsole stack. So only
was the Superior the one that had like Velcro on the top?
No, so that's the King MT, which they just re-released.
Okay.
And and then Speedland. I would kind of put Speedland in this category too, because they also have anatomical foot-shaped toe box. It's not as wide as these other two that we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but the same principles there of being able to do that. But they just released a shoe that also has that Velcro. Their GL.
Oh, the GL. Yeah, I see it right there. Mouth level.
Yeah, this one here.
Oh, no, I was thinking of the orange one. But yes.
Oh, yeah. So this one has that power strap. But the King MT also had that, which was a super popular shoe. But the Superior was like it in terms it had very, very low stack. So you're much closer to the ground, much more natural.
Yeah.
But the basics were that Topo Athletic added some drop from heel to toe, and they also had a more secure fitting midfoot and heel. And that's where, like, our trail reviewers, once we started getting Topo Athletic in, even some of the first generations, it was like, wow, this is awesome to be able to have that toe splay, especially on longer distance runs, but also feel really secure in the cabin and not be moving around on more technical terrain. And so, and those principles stay the same. And Altra has done some things lately that can counteract that. They have different widths of different models with different widths. And so you could have the original, which was like the Lone Peak, which is still their biggest seller. Yeah, which I'm sure, I mean,
I had a bunch of those. I had 4 or 5 of those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so those are considered, well, nowadays they would be considered like low to moderate stack height. But at the day, they were, right in the middle there.
Yeah.
But then you can go to shoes like the Outroad, which is kind of like their gravel trail road in between shoe, which is on a slim last. And all of their racing shoes, like their road racing Vanish shoe, those are on a slim last. So it's going to hold tighter and have an option more like the Topo Athletic shoes.
Yeah, I've not seen the Outroad. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid shoe, and their Outroad 3, 4 should be coming out in not too long if it hasn't already.
So why is
there's
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, then there's the really popular Olympus, which is their high stack shoe, and that's on a wide last, so that's even wider.
Okay.
And so they've evolved from their one size fits all kind of mentality.
Yeah.
For sure.
Why do you think that? I mean, what do I not know about shoes? Why is like the natural foot shape not the de facto for all shoes? Like, I mean, what's the case for different shapes in the toe box?
Yeah. And so, I mean, one is that we're all used to just cramming our foot all the way in the forefoot. And most of us can. Like, if you have an average foot width or even a narrower one, it's not going to matter as much to you.
Yeah.
That being said, like, I have like average to borderline getting into wide forefoot. And you can definitely tell the difference when your toes are able to splay. And so some of the things I was starting to engage more lower calf muscles and foot muscles just because of that, which can make you a stronger runner, right? And so, but why doesn't everybody do that? It takes more material to do that in the forefoot.
Okay. Yeah.
It's gonna need to be a wider base. So you're gonna add some stability, which is great for most trail runners, but for road runners, you don't necessarily need that. And so it's gonna add weight, it's gonna add some stability. And in our mind, it doesn't look as good.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't.
Kind of objective, right? It doesn't look as good.
Okay, if we're gonna go pure design, it's not the best looking thing out there. I'd rather, if we're gonna optimize for design, that's not the shape I want.
Yeah, exactly. and so those are some of the things. And performance wise, sure, you're gonna lose some of the ability to use your big toe, but if most runners aren't anyways in their daily life, it's not like you can just switch on race day and all of a sudden be utilizing your big toe more. It's something that you have to do consistently.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of things going against, and we probably won't ever get to a time where, everybody has a wide foot option or a natural foot option in their line. But that being said, Nike has the Wild Horse, which was initially a lot like the Lone Peak and then took a hiatus, very different styling, and now is a lot more. I think I have it somewhere.
I saw the Wild Horse.
My other shoe rack.
Shoe rack B. I saw the Wild Horse today when I was looking I went to iRun France, or I don't even know how you say iRun.fr store here in Paris to look for ultras to get some photos. And I saw the Wild Horse on there. One thing I will say that I love about Ultra as a Utah kid, I went in when I was in there taking photos of ultras, to see Temp and to see Lone Peak and King, all of the, those are the names of peaks that are essentially along the Wasatch Front. And to know that that became a global brand, and that that the Lone Peak that's the peak that's there in Draper that you can see. I mean, you can see it from anywhere in Salt Lake County. Yeah. But, these are just iconic names. And so there is an ego to Ultra. There's
totally,
and I don't necessarily, and maybe in a good way and a bad way. There's a pride in Utah that is ingrained in the brand. And part of the brand of Utah, for those who are not from there, is, we're Jazz fans and, perpetually frustrated. RSL had one great season. For the record, the only season that RSL ever won the cup, I sang the national anthem at the opening game of that season, year one of the new stadium, and then they went on to win the cup. But by and large, Utah is always trying to prove itself, and it's always over. And in my opinion, some Utahns could listen and disagree. There's always an overcompensation. Trying to justify why the Jazz shouldn't just, straight up leave Utah. Why are they even there? There's always something like that. And so I think that's ingrained in the shoe. And so this manifestation through Lone Peak, Temp, there's probably, I think there's an Olympus. Yeah. But then it goes down into Escalante, which is Southern Utah. They've done a great job of ingraining it into Utah. And that could also have been its Achilles heel. No pun intended.
Well, I mean, I would say by and large, most people don't know that their shoes are named after most of the peaks.
Yeah. It's
and
pretty cool.
So maybe it doesn't. Hopefully, it's not an Achilles heel. But they should have an ego for a reason. They've done a lot to.
They changed the industry, right? To some degree.
Yeah, exactly. To a huge degree. Yeah. They were one of the. I mean, all the brands that we've talked about when they started in that late 2008, 9, 10 era, Ultra hit it in a huge way. And then I would say they're one of the brands that are responsible, along with, Solomon was there and Hoka started to be there, but they're one of the brands that are really responsible for taking this small sport to a global thing. And so
love that.
Even if we can't run it in, not everybody can run in Ultra's original shoes. They're responsible for a lot within the community, and that's they should have a little bit of ego about that, and by what they're schlepping to.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and I appreciate you saying it. So with Topo then? So if Ultra's doing its thing, Topo has a similar. We're talking about we're in the same sphere of what it offers, plus or minus a handful of features. What was the first shoe that you remember holding from Topo or interacting with and thinking, oh, okay, these guys are going to really start to compete like they haven't before? Was there a moment?
So it was actually in COVID, and I got the Ultra Venture, the original Ultra Venture, which now they're on their 4th iteration. I mean, it's one of their most popular shoes, probably my favorite shoe that they have. But I remember getting into the Ultra Venture. It wasn't ugly, but it wasn't appealing. I would say that. So just like you get that. And I've never been one to, I know you pick a lot of shoes based off of
looks,
aesthetics a lot.
Yeah.
But I get it, and I could pretty much care less because I'm just running in it. It's going to get dirty anyways, that kind of stuff. And so, but I remember pulling it out of the box and like, whoa, okay. But then when I put it on, and I pretty much went from and this was like when everything was shut down during COVID, I pretty much went from my house, did a big 20-mile mountainous loop in them. And I'm like, wow, this is the real deal. Like, it's not just a company trying to do what Ultra is doing. Like, and then I started digging into more of like, what is Topo Athletic? You just assume that it's about a
topographic
map.
Yeah.
And so, but then it's Tony Post and his history and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, wow. So there's been a ton of investment into making this a viable shoe. And like already I had been in the Timp 2 around that time already. So like I had been pretty partial to Ultra already because the Timp 2 was an awesome shoe. And I think that's actually, besides the Lone Peak, having people like Jason Schlarb and the Ultra athletes of then, like just crush it. I think Hayden Hawks was maybe around during that time.
Yes, he was.
Too, of like just crushing it in that shoe.
Yeah.
And then Ultra saw another rise after that. But that was an awesome shoe. But then getting, again, back to the Ultra Venture, getting into that shoe, I'm like, wow, this is maybe comparable or even better for me personally as an athlete because it had that 5mm drop. It had great grip on the bottom. It had the Vibram Mega Grip, which not a lot of shoes had Vibram Mega Grip around that time. And Topo Athletic had a really nice lug pattern, which is still on most of their shoes. I could probably get one right here.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah. And so they developed basically this really deeply lugged 5mm.
That looks aggressive.
Yeah, it's super aggressive. And maybe more aggressive than most people would need, but they were developing a really solid trail shoe. So this is the Mountain Racer 3. Yeah, the Mountain Racer 3, which you were just running with Billy Yang.
I was going to say, I think he was wearing those at some red ones.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
how did you know that? Is he working with them formally, or you just observed it?
No, just being around. I know he really liked the Mountain Racer 2.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, this yellow is really, you notice this when it's on people's feet.
Yeah.
And so the Mountain Racer 3 has that same Vibram Mega Grip outsole that their Topo has become known for. And they've altered it a little bit too. But so all of those things, it had grip, had a great fit through the midfoot and heel, which was one of their original design principles of like, we wanted that. And you had some of that toe splay, but it wasn't too wide. It was enough to get a noticeable action from a wider forefoot, but not too wide. And so so then I started putting more and more miles on it. And it's like one of my all-time favorite shoes. So that original Ultra Venture really set the bar really high. And then when we started getting into some of the other options that they have, let me see, there was another one that I'm just going to look it up on Believe in the Run real quick.
Yeah.
That really had my number for a little while. And it was a 3mm drop shoe, which you don't hear of many shoes on the market that are in that 0 to 5. It's either 0 or up to 4 and above. And that shoe, let's see here. Okay. So I'm just going through shoes here and I'm like, wow, they do have a lot. They have the Pursuit 2, which is their like 0 drop shoe.
Yeah.
Moderate stack 0 drop shoe, just for listeners who want to try some of these. The Ultra Venture is one of my favorites. It's a really nice. They market it as a door to trail shoe, but it could easily be a 100-mile ultra distance shoe. There it is. The Terra Venture. the Terra Venture series has a 3 mm drop, and it's fairly moderate. It's very comparable to like the Lone Peak.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Yeah.
But that was another shoe where it's like, wow, and I had been, testing a lot of the Lone Peaks, reviewing those, and they're a good shoe. But then the Terra Venture just had a little something different, a little bit softer underfoot, had that outsole that was really lugged. And then it had that great fit. And so when those shoes started coming in, and repeatedly we were giving them like, year-end awards, that kind of stuff. And like, who's Topo Athletic still? Like, even though we're really stoked on the brand. But then in that era is when if Ultra wasn't working for you, but you really liked the fit and everything, then we were saying like, oh, here's this other option, Topo Athletic. Yeah. And Topo Athletic has really gained their own ego in a sense of that they are not the ones that are sticking to only zero drop. And they've done a really good job too. And I think have also forced the hand of Ultra to do a better job in terms of like, let's look at the midsoles. Let's look at, well, maybe we do need to add some drop to some of our options, and just expanding this whole natural foot shaped category to a whole new level and again, I think I've said this before, like I appreciate Thomas's outlook on a lot of things in the industry, Thomas, our founder, and his idea of competition within the industry is only going to continue to push everybody up. And so Altra and Topo Athletic have done that for each other, whether I don't think they've ever either side has come out and say we're competing with them. It's pretty obvious when you're the only two basically that have the same principles. Yeah.
One interesting observation about these, just having been here for Paris Fashion Week, is that neither of these brands seem to, by and large, bother themselves with the urban fashion piece that seems to be happening with every single other brand, from Merrell to Hoka to whatever. These when someone was wearing the Lone Peaks around town in Salt Lake City, like my dentist Eric Storheim, who's super speedy, when you're wearing these, you were not making a fashion statement, like in terms of like, hey, I like to dress well. You were saying, you were letting people know I'm a dirty ultra runner. This is what I do. These guys I haven't seen either of these brands play yet. I don't see them in a store in Paris, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I live in mostly a hiking town. A lot of people do wear ultras and topos, but that's because they're hikers. Yeah. Yes. Hikers or runners. And that's a huge part of their identity, which is not necessarily fashion oriented.
Yeah.
With that being said, both brands have had some pretty cool collabs, like where Topo Athletics mostly stick into like, they have a New York Marathon version of some of their road shoes, like those kind of collabs. But Ultra has dipped into some of the more specific artists. And like you were saying, you just saw the Soar version of was it the Timp?
Oh gosh. Is that right? I honestly don't remember. I can tell you what it looks like. White with all of these really beautiful colors on it, but I don't remember which one.
It was a really good looking shoe. That was like one of the first times I'm like, wow.
And Ultra. Soar Running, for those who don't know Soar Running, it's a smaller brand, but it's a high price point because it's a really high quality, innovative technology in their clothing. And
totally.
I don't want to get it wrong, but shorts are going to be, it's in that thing where you're looking at $200 or $300.
Yep.
But they have
the boutique athletic brand.
Yes. But for this one, my take on it from just interacting with them while they were here is that what you're getting, you're not paying for brand. Some brands you're paying a lot for the brand. I think Soar puts a lot of money into the technology and what they're doing. At least every piece of clothing they showed me was this is what this one is designed to lock down when you step down, all this sort of stuff that's way over my head.
Yep.
But they're investing in the technology of the clothing. All that to say, Tim Soar, who owns it, was in the fashion industry, so he thinks about aesthetics a lot. And so he put his touch into an Ultra shoe. And so they have a I don't know what you actually call them, like a race jersey and shorts and
a full kit for him.
Yeah, full kit that all match the shoe, and it's really, really clean. Looks really good.
Yeah. Oh, everything they do, like every piece of clothing that I've gotten for review becomes my new favorite. Like it's that quality. Even though people get so bogged down on price, and I completely understand that. But if you're willing to pay the price for something like that with Soar, you're getting
it's kind of like, to me, it's like the Norda value thing too. It's like these things are expensive, but these are really, really good. They're going to last you a lot longer than you're going to get value out of them that way, as well as liking them quite a bit.
Yeah, something that you can put on and you like actually feel the performance benefit.
Yes, that's right.
Instead of just
you don't always get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's cool that Altra is just in the past, really thinking like the past year or so has been dipping into that side of it, because I mean, I think we've talked about it with every brand that we've talked about. The lifestyle piece of it is becoming much more of a lucrative opportunity than it ever has before.
Yeah.
And even putting a lot of stock into that. Some companies are, but these two brands aren't necessarily known for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in their 2025 portfolios? Are you seeing innovation? Are you seeing more of the same? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think one thing that's going to draw consumers to either of these brands is that you're not going to all of a sudden get something from left field that changes the landscape of who they are. And so you're always going to get that same fit. You're always going to get a similar drop. But for these two brands in particular, Topo Athletic, they're going to be coming out with an updated version of their mountain racer. So the Mountain Racer 4, which has been, I just had that one, the Mountain Racer 3, which has been one of their, maybe it is their best selling shoe at this point.
Yeah.
Mountain Racer 1 was the shoe that won some end of year awards for us back in whatever year it came out. And also I ran 100-miler in it. And so it like immediately became a very elevated shoe for me. Yeah. And like very rugged 100-miler.
Which one did you run?
Stood up. It's called the Palisades.
Okay.
Ultra in Palisades, Idaho.
Oh,
yeah. It's small and beautiful. Yeah.
Love it.
So yeah, if anybody's in that area, it's just over the border of like Jackson area. Like you just go over into Idaho and it's in that area. It was beautiful. Like
nice.
Awesome. And rugged. My feet were so beat up, but on my own doing, because I should have went a size bigger, but the shoe itself, the Mountain Racer, like handled it really nicely. It was just my own personal sizing that did me in.
Messed you up.
I only had one toenail left. But again, it wasn't because of the shoe. The Mountain Racer has really taken off, and it's a really small update that they're doing for the Mountain Racer 4. I believe it's just an upper update, just to update some of this fit. Like talking to Tony Post and some of the other people at Altra or Topo, excuse me. They take everything so seriously. So if there's a minor adjustment that they need to make, but everything else is wonderful, they're going to do that. And so that is mostly going to focus on the midfoot hold for their Mountain Racer and the heel. And so just updating that, and that's going to be a great shoe on its own. A lot of our reviewers love this shoe, and will take this as like, if you had a one shoe quiver, this is a great shoe to have, basically.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so we're going to see that. And they're also going to get some updated, a brand new high stack shoe called the Vista. And so it's jumping up into that category of like close to 40 millimeters, which is really high, but they're widening the base of it. Whoa. Like many high stack shoes do. Yeah. And that one's really exciting because the foams that Topo has been rolling out with in the last couple of years have been like really resilient, which you want in a trail shoe, but they're also starting to be responsive and really highly cushioned. And so those are the two big ones for Topo on the trail side this year.
I'm surprised. So, I mean, it's so funny how times have changed so much, but these high stack shoes to me are looking, I just love the way they look.
Yeah.
You know, as they first came out for the function, as really great designers have got their hands on that function and made them also beautiful. I just feel like this Topo is probably one of their best looking shoes, the one that you just mentioned.
Yeah, the Vista.
The Vista, yeah.
It totally is. And that's something that Topo has received some criticism for.
Yeah.
Like, people really like the idea of the shoe and the design, but it doesn't look that great. So I'm going to just find something else. They're starting to really, over the last 2-3 years, have really picked up their game in that respect, for sure. Like, they're really high quality performing shoes, and now they're starting to look good too.
Yeah, I feel like they're getting smarter. Their logo is so big. You know, I feel like they're getting smarter with how they're putting it on the shoe, for whatever that's worth.
Totally.
Nothing to do with performance whatsoever.
Yep. Hey, but there is a lot of research.
It matters for sales.
It matters for sale, and there's, brain research about look good, feel good. That's like a real thing.
Yeah.
And so
great point.
Yeah. So if you can buy something that looks good, even better.
Yeah.
And then Altra, they have a bunch of updates. I think the most noticeable for them will be the Ultra Olympus 275, I think. Let me look that up too. But basically taking their Olympus, which is their highest stack shoe, still zero drop. It's super popular with thru hikers, 100-mile runners, and just people who want a zero drop shoe with a lot of cushion, like really popular in service industries.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What Hoka would be popular for too.
Yeah.
And so they're taking that platform and giving it the performance upgrade. So it's getting a matrix upper, a more like sock-like collar for fit. And so they're just really dialing in the fit so that it can be a shoe that can go far and go on more technical terrain. I believe it's the Olympus 275, which if someone's more interested in that shoe in particular, we have all of these shoes for Topo and Ultra on YouTube. You can go look at some previews on the Believe in the Run YouTube. Yep. Ultra 275.
I'll post links on that below on the show notes. Yep.
Yeah. And so I think that one's the big one for Ultra, but they're also coming out with a Timp 5 BOA, which Timp is one of those. It kind of got revitalized in the 5th generation. The 3rd and 4th were, they could have used some extra attention, but that was also in their time of where many would see Ultra as really dipping, and they're coming back. And so the Timp 5 was a really solid shoe, kind of fits that same category as the Mountain Racer that we were talking about. Yeah. Just kind of a do-it-all shoe, but to get a BOA fit system on a shoe, like they also have a lot of research showing that just by putting the BOA fit system on there, it could be of upwards of a 2% increase in performance. Like,
oh wow.
And so if you can dial in fit on a solid shoe, like that's pretty awesome. I think we'll see a lot of those on people's feet, just a solid shoe.
Yeah. I mean, I think with all of this, like that dip that you talk about in Ultra, meaning it came out strong, had a ton of market share, and then all of a sudden there were other players that were coming in, but I think there was also internal strife within Ultra that made life a bit challenging for a few seasons. You know, I've had conversations with folks over at Ultra that are really bullish on what's to come. Like they want to go back to that energy that they had prior to selling to private equity and whatever. And so they go to one company and now they're owned by is it the company that owns North Face too?
VF Corp. Yep.
So they're owned by VF Corp. Important to note that Topo is owned by DSW. They're both owned by these larger sort of shoe conglomerates, or, you know, outdoor conglomerates in Ultra's case. But point being, Ultra's wanting to come back and kind of have that early day energy again. That's what I'm hearing. And I think that sounds like fun. I hope they can do it. There's a lot more competition now. Yeah.
I mean, they're doing good to some respect of branching out to new consumers. They have the whole, they have on the roadside and the trail side, they have a line that adds 4 millimeter of drop. So like, that's something that's not going to go anywhere. They're going to continue developing shoes in those categories. But they've also done a really good job at like, hey, we have the lone peak, and we're not going to change that from year to year, like really at all. It's basically the last 5 iterations have been basically the same with small tweaks here and there, which is a great thing. And they've also re-released some of their older shoes, like the King MT, to that. What like people were like, why did he get rid of the King MT, which was one of those felt like a more niche shoe, but there were more people in it than what was thought. And so those were some of the growing pains of coming under a larger corporation for them. And Topo Athletic had some, because they're just fairly recently under the DSW brand portfolio. And so both of them did have growing pains, but I would say both companies are really coming out of it.
It's great that they're both kind of coming out at similar times where they're, I don't know of any other two brands that come to mind immediately within trail that are like so head to head, like really fighting for the same customer, similar customer.
Yeah.
And so that means we're going to, as consumers, we're going to win because they're going to be fighting real hard to put out the best possible shoe.
Yeah. And there are some other smaller brands that are coming out, like Flux is one of them that have pretty much very similar design principles. And they add, an element of their own of like, this is how we are able to connect you to the ground, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's really no other brand like it. And I'm glad they're both doing well. I think as Altra continues to do better, Topo's going to continue to do better. And they're both, they both have different focal points, even though they have the same principles, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Altra is really concerned with maintaining their ego within their population and growing, where Topo Athletic has less of that, but they want to grow on the performance side in terms of they're doing really well at bringing technologies across both road and trail, and Ultra's starting to do that too. But they have different focal points at this time, and I don't see them as being like it's either this or that anytime soon.
Yeah.
In terms of the industry.
Well, this episode was long overdue. I'm glad that we finally got to do it. I feel like I could go on and on because there's still a lot of like old fun Ultra Utah stories, but for another time. Thanks for joining me today.
And I just want to mention like both the active founder, Brian, right now, Beck said, like, he's a dude that if you get to learn more about him and get to know him a little bit more or go on a fishing trip with him, he's like one of those kind of guys of like, it's a very real, cool person at the head of Ultra. Even with VF Corp, he has a lot of say in what's going on there. So there's a lot of great things to come. On the other side, too, Tony Post, he's the dude I'd love to just go on a road trip with him and hear more of his experience. And like another really cool, solid dude at the head there who has a lot of say with what's going on. So for those that are concerned, like, big industry has taken them over, sure, in some ways, but having those voices at the forefront of their brands will ensure a certain level of quality and direction in those companies. And
I've heard cool that VF has been very good. They've worked to restore some things that were lost in the in between of being independently owned and being private equity owned. And to your point also about Brian, he has coined something that I can't remember what he calls it. It's better than this, but it's ultra fishing. Yeah, he calls it ultra fishing, where you run an ultra marathon way into the mountains of Utah with a group of buddies, and then you fish, I guess, all day, and then you run an ultra marathon back.
Yeah. And there's also some like weird races that have kind of come from those ideas of like, you have to run to X do something, distance, but then you have to catch X amount of fish on the way back, and then you can finish. Something like that.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well,
do that in your ultras.
Let's do this again sometimes. Good talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah. See you.